Greetings, my name is Misterovich, and this is a statement of intent. I'm inspired to dedicate my life to growing food for others in a way that prioritizes sustainability, community building, minimizing of inputs, practicality, and respect for ecology. In the first part of this video, I'm just going to explain some general concepts within regenerative agriculture. So if you'd rather skip that and just hear my specific plans, you can go to this timestamp in the video. So what improvements can we make to the way that food is usually grown? Well, one huge problem with today's widespread practices is a lack of biodiversity. Monocropping represents roughly 80% of worldwide agriculture. Monocropping is the cultivation of large swaths of a single crop. Here's a monocrop of canola seed for canola oil, and here's a monocrop apple orchard. Monocropping is about as far away from a natural ecosystem as you can get without just being bare soil. So lots of problems come with this, of course: pests, disease, lack of nutrients, soil degradation. Currently, these problems are managed with pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, lots of inputs. But we all know the downsides of these inputs. So how could we grow a lot of food without these inputs? If you've ever paid attention to a wild ecosystem, you will notice that none of these inputs are really required. Yet still, large bounties of food are produced. So here we have a pine forest with several hundreds of kilograms of blueberries sitting underneath. So it's producing a valuable timber in the wood of the tree, and also the blueberries. Here we have a lake in the Midwest of the United States with abundant wild rice growing. So in order to grow food to feed our communities without heavy use of these synthetic or organic inputs, we need to mimic wild systems. The next topic in which I'd really like to make some improvements is soil erosion. So soil erosion is one of the biggest challenges farmers face today. With current practices, approximately 24 billion tons of topsoil are lost each year. Now, there are three simple solutions to this that I would like to implement. The first is preventing rain from directly striking the ground. So that can be achieved with just basically always having the soil covered with some sort of living, growing plant, whether that's trees, cover crops, etc. Next, we have simply mulch covering the soil. So for example, under trees in certain agroforestry systems. Then thirdly, we can hold soil in place with multiple perennial species which provide a variety of root depths and structures to really hold and stabilize that soil, even during, for example, in these cold temperate climates during the winter when there's no vegetation growing. Another way which I think that we could improve, and I think is maybe overlooked, is beauty or aesthetics. Now, I do think there is a certain aesthetic produced by those large fields of single annual crops, which I really do enjoy. But I do think most people would agree that environments like these, that are closer to a wild ecosystem, are simply a more beautiful place to spend time in, and are more calming and feel more natural to us. And definitely is the sort of place that you would want to have a community based around. Another category which I think we could improve in is just general practicality or efficiency. So on one hand, there's these massive field cropping systems which kind of isolate the farmers, these huge places, and they're so far away from even the next house, like definitely not even a walking distance. But then also these systems create a massive need for financial investment in both land and equipment. But at the other extreme, we have these little permaculture food forest and market gardens, which typically involve an almost overwhelming level of complexity. And this requires an impractical level of management and inputs. So I do believe a system somewhere in between that's small enough to incorporate farms and farmers into a vibrant, local, perhaps even walkable community, that's possible. And I also believe that that would help with the financial aspect, which prevents so many young people from getting into farming. But at the same time, balanced with simplified systems that allow for efficient management and ease of training that allow a large scale, which is really capable of feeding large communities. Another way that I'm inspired to improve farming practices is nutrition. So there have been a lot of studies that show that over time our foods have been diminished in their content of certain minerals, nutrients, vitamins. I believe this is because of, the lack of ecosystem services. When we just put, for example, wheat in bare soil with nothing around, and then we just add fertilizers. Some certain nutrients end up getting degraded in that soil, and over time, the food is not as nutritious. On the other hand, wild foods are documented to have higher levels of nutrition. So I do believe when we make our farms more closely resemble wild ecosystems, the nutrition of the food that we produce will also more closely resemble the quality of wild foods. Lastly, I would like to have an emphasis on community or culture. So today, most people are not very connected to the production of their food. Most people eat food from faraway places. When we are in direct relation with the place and the process of growing the food we eat, I just believe more care will be taken towards the effects of that production. On the flip side, most farmers never interact with the people that eat the food they grew. I also believe when a farmer has a direct relationship with the consumer, more care will be taken and just general better outcomes will come for all. So now I'm going to talk about some examples that I'd like to emulate. So first off, I have to talk about this guy, Byron Grows, who has a YouTube channel, and he really dives into a lot of detail on this concept called syntropic agroforestry. And basically, it's a lot about what I've been talking about with mimicking natural ecosystems. And so he has been really inspiring to me, and I've learned a lot from the videos. And he has gone to tour all these different farms that are implementing these techniques all around the world, and it's a lot of good information that one can learn from. Next up is this farm in Germany called Gött and Bösel, I believe, and they are implementing some of these agroforestry processes. But what's different about them is, for example, that first guy, he's in New Zealand, so it's a bit more tropical, and they have like bananas and things like that. Whereas this farm in Germany is more similar ecosystem to where I have lived, and they are using certain species like poplar, apples, plums, stuff like that, and I find it very inspiring. Also, certain techniques they use, like getting this fruit pulp that was from pressing juices from a juice factory, and then they just plant in the roads these seeds. Then after time, the ones that pop up and are stronger, they select for those and cut out the rest, and then field graft varieties of apples, for example, onto those. So they have these really cool practices, and it's at a really big scale. It's a huge farm. I forget how many acres, but it's really large, and that is a very inspiring example. Next off is the indigenous practices of North America. So there have been a lot of quotes of European settlers who arrived and would describe the bounty of the natural systems here. Like, there were so many birds in the air you couldn't even see the sky, or there's so many fish in the river you could walk across it because you could just walk on the backs of the fish. And I've read and listened to some podcasts about this thing called an oak savanna, which is it's kind of in between farming and hunting and gathering, and they're kind of stewarding these landscapes that wouldn't naturally be like how they are if it wasn't for the humans. But it's not like they're cultivating every day. They might only come back to this one area every couple of years. But hearing those systems described is very inspiring. And of course, you can't mention North American native practices without mentioning the Three Sisters garden system, where they have corn, beans, and squash. The squash is the ground cover, which kind of acts as a living mulch. The corn grows and is the stalk for the beans to climb up, and the beans are nitrogen fixers, which the corn needs a lot of nitrogen, so they add nitrogen to the soil, which helps the corn grow. Next up is, of course, Andrew Millison, which has an amazing YouTube channel, and he's done all these different projects around the world, in South America, in India, in Africa especially, and it's really, really inspiring, and he has lots of videos that explain all the details of water management and all these permaculture principles. So his videos are very inspiring and have taught me a lot. Next up is, in general, alley cropping in Europe. I've done a lot of reading. I've seen in Sweden there's been a lot of farms that have cereals, so like wheat, barley, oats, and then they have rows of trees like apples, different shrubs, hazelnuts, etc. But specifically, I was reading about this study on these farms in Hungary, where they were having grain crops in the middle, but also having black locust, rows of black locust, which is this amazing tree. It's nitrogen fixing. It's in the bean family, but it's a tree, and it makes this timber, which is very hard and durable, but it's also rot resistant, and it's very useful for making, well, basically anything outdoor. But a big use for it is fence posts, and you can see here it says black locust yields rot-resistant fence posts after 8 to 10 years, which can produce more revenue per acre than corn or soy in many regions. Black locust is best suited for farmers that are interested in pruning and harvesting trees in the winter and selling fence posts. So that, I think, is a very inspiring thing, and definitely something I want to incorporate, this idea of having timber, but especially in the same way that, after the world got exposed to these crops that came from South America, like potatoes and tomatoes, everyone just adapted it because there are just certain ways in which they were better and certain uses that they better. So I think something like black locust would be extremely important, that we need to plant a lot of this and incorporate it into these farm fields. And it's such a valuable resource that I think we really should be doing this, and it's very important. Next up is Mark Shepard, which he is another permaculturist, I guess you would say, regenerative agriculture kind of guru or leader in that sense. And he wrote this book that was very influential called Restoration Agriculture. And he's done a lot of work in the upper Midwest of the United States, trying to replicate that oak savanna I was talking about before. And so his work, and I've listened to many podcasts, has been very inspiring, and I've learned a lot. Now I'm going to explain specifically my vision, what I would like to do with my life. So I would really like to do this alley cropping agroforestry system. So in either North America or Northern Europe, the types of crops we would have is black locust, which is that tree which grows really fast and it just produces this amazing, straight, rot-resistant, hard timber. Then we also have pine, Korean pine, which produces good timber, but also produces pine nuts. So they take a long time to grow and eventually produce these pine nuts, but it's a really valuable species, and you can just have them in the rows, slowly growing up over time. And eventually, it's this amazing thing to have these trees planted for the next generation. And then along with that goes, of course, walnuts, chestnuts, things like that. Very tall trees that will produce these amazing, calorie, protein, oil-rich nuts, which don't require this tilling of the soil and traditional systems. And then underneath those, in the understory, just like a normal forest has several layers of trees, we have apple, plum, mulberry, cherry, hazelnuts to obviously produce fruit and have producing the oil from the hazelnuts, which is a very important thing, which I think is overlooked in temperate systems, we all get olive oil because we've heard about how healthy it is, because it does not have these omega-6 fatty acids like all other seed oils do. But hazelnut oil is actually the same way. It's just as healthy as olive oil. So to me, it blows my mind that we don't have all over Northern America, Europe, or South America, that we don't have huge crops of hazelnuts growing to provide this healthy oil. But underneath that, we have the shrub and bush layer. So we could have willow, sea buckthorn, and those are support species which pioneer and kind of establish the system in a similar way to how the beans give nitrogen to corn in the Three Sisters. The willow, sea buckthorn, poplar, they will be the support species which you keep pruning aggressively to provide the mulch. So you don't have to input all this mulch. You have mulch growing right there in the rows. And then underneath that, you have perennial herbs. So, whatever those could be, like hyssop, onion, garlic, amaranth, dill, mint, radish, milkweed, comfrey, burdock, chamomile, mint, yarrow, etc. And then the base layer would be strawberry and clover. So we're really mimicking this ecosystem, and we'd have it in rows. And then in the middle, you have your alley crops. So you have grains, possibly vegetables, and also hardy kiwi, which I think is also mind-boggling that this isn't grown at a larger scale. It's a kiwi that is hardy to even the coldest temperatures in, for example, Siberia in Russia. And it produces this fruit, which I tasted when I was in France once. And they're just small versions of kiwis which taste exactly the same, and they have extremely similar nutrition profile with vitamin K and large amounts of vitamin C. And I think this would be a really important crop, so we can have it on trellises in the rows between those lines of forest ecosystems. So here's how starting the project would look like. So first, it would just be observation. So you look what is already existing on the site, what pioneers are there, what species are kind of like weeds and can really produce a lot of biomass. And then consultation, of course. So all those people I listed before, whoever I can get in touch with, whatever masters of these systems, I would get in touch with as many people as I can. I would visit their farms, things like that, and really get their expert opinions. So then with that information, you can start seed collection and air prune boxes. So air prune boxes are these sort of, kind of looks like a raised bed, but on the underneath, it has this metal mesh. And what it does, it just produces really high quality starts of trees. And it makes the root system very healthy. Because usually in a pot, the roots circle round and round, but in these air prune boxes, they hit the air at the bottom and they stop growing and they branch out instead. So one would do a lot of seed collection and then seed directly in the rows, but also growing in the air prune boxes. So next would be subsoiling or digging. And I've heard a lot in all these different systems I've researched is that it's important to break the subsoil, especially as I want to be restoring degraded land that's just been having these monocrops on them for years and years and years. It gets really compacted from all the tractors going on them, and so important part is subsoiling, which would be using a tractor or heavy machinery, or something called double digging, which would be more by hand. So that's depending on the scale. If it was a smaller scale, which I think would be wise to start with, you can do it by hand. Next would be, of course, observing and management. So you allow these systems to grow up and you plant it very densely and you just see how are things interacting, what species are enjoying this location. That's something I've heard from these systems. These people that have had success, they all say that it's important to just observe, plant a lot of stuff and observe what works, what doesn't. Each site is different and you can't know. These are, pretty experimental systems we're using, so you just need to use a lot of trial and error and see what works And the beauty is you just plant a lot of stuff, and what doesn't work, you cut it down and feed it to the rest. You use it as mulch. Next is, of course, refining the systems. Okay, it might start out really chaotic with all these things, but then you funnel it down and see, okay, what is really effective? This crop with this crop works really well. It's easy to harvest. It's easy to teach workers how to harvest, and the community really enjoys consuming this, and there's a big market for it. So things like that. And then, of course, after that is establishing a market, basically establishing distribution. So a common way is CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. So that's where you pay at the beginning of the season a set amount, or maybe per month, and then just every week you get a box of vegetables, fruits, what have you. So I think that could be a cool system, but I've also heard of some other farms that had done where it's kind of like a U-pick, but it's similar to the CSA where you pay, a monthly fee, and then you're just allowed to come and pick a certain amount of vegetables yourself. I've heard that that's beneficial because when you pick the vegetable yourself, you're less likely to be picky, like when you're in the grocery store and you don't want to take the apple that just has one little spot on it. And then possibly at the end is adding sheep. So a lot of these systems do include grazing animals, and there's lots of benefits to that. And of course, wool and stuff like that could be useful. And then, of course, the most important thing would be spreading this systems that have been refined and been proven to work really well to the rest of the world, because we think this is an important thing that should be happening all over the place. So if you have anything that you think is insightful, or anything, comments or help, then you can email it to me here. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you for watching this video.